kind of Doctor Who fandom, and then as a writer, and then as a script editor, you were a child actor, and you were Dick in the famous Five on ITV, and I was doing an event with Peter Richardson from the Comic Strip Presents the other day, and of course one of the things that for many people is now the famous Five is Adrian Edmondson, Peter Richardson, French and Saunders, and Timmy the dog.
He's so lucky.
Did that have any effect, like in terms of, 4 years before you'd been in the kids' TV show, and then it became the opening night of Channel 4?
Was it only 4 years between us and...
I think it was about 1978.
Yeah, we were 78, yeah.
4 years.
Yeah, the only thing, I mean, I loved them. I watched the comic strip stuff as they went out and thought beautifully done and very clever and very smart, particularly Uncle Quentin. But the only thing that has plagued me, which I would like to, if I saw Peter Richardson, punch him, is the line that they used in the comic strip one, which is lashings of ginger beer, which is something that Enid Blyton never wrote in her life, and no TV version or film version or any version of the Famous Five has ever used the phrase lashings. It follows you around. And you say to someone, oh yeah, I did the Famous Five. Lashings of ginger beer. And after about the 28th time of going, no, nobody ever said that. That was only in the parody version. And then they look at you in a kind of, oh, that's not very interesting. But lashings of ginger beer. So now you just go, yeah. Lashings of ginger beer.
To be fair, I don't think Enid Blyton had Uncle Quentin saying, and I'm also a voracious homosexual. Well, I think that never got through the edit.
But I think, reading between the lines of the books, no, you're absolutely right.
I think Ronald Allen would have made a wonderful Doctor Who, actually. I'm a huge fan of Ronald Allen.
I love Ronnie Allen. He's a fantastic actor. He's brilliant. I wish we'd had him in proper Famous Five. We had lots of good Doctor Who actors in Famous Five. But we didn't have Ronald Allen, and I've always loved him. But then I was a big Crossroads fan. So, one of my earliest memories of Crossroads is David Hunter being shot by Rosemary Hunter, who, when she turned up in Greatest Show in the Galaxy, I kind of whooped very loudly, and my other half at the time went, what? And I went, that's Rosemary Hunter, she shot David Hunter in Crossroads, and realised that my other half was just looking at me in a kind of, you're a real sad person. Janet Hargreaves, brilliant actress.
No, I absolutely love that. We better not. I mean, I would love just to talk for the next half hour about Ronald Allen, but apparently that convention's not till next year. So now, Keith, I want to ask you, what was it like? What was your first experience of Doctor Who in terms of going from being a fan and then actually going into that world? I'd just like to know a bit about the transition.
Well, out of the blue. It seemed to me out of the blue, back in about 2007, someone from the Doctor Who office rang me and said, would you be interested in writing an episode of Doctor Who? And first of all, I couldn't believe it. And I said, yes, of course. And they said, well, okay, but don't tell anyone. Keep this to yourself. And as soon as I put the phone down to her, I was, oh, yes, guess what? And for whatever reason, I didn't get to write for it for another year. So all the people I told in that year just called me a liar, and I was a fantasist, and there was no way that I could prove that I wasn't until a year later. So that was the first introduction to the world of Doctor Who. In fact, you were there for my very first meeting in Brighton.
Yes, that's right. The MIPCOM thing.
Yes, that's it. Yes. So we had a meeting in a hotel room. Russell, Julie, and you. And Russell sort of outlined the episode he wanted me to write. And again, it was like this. If only I could meet my 10-year-old self and say, guess what, you're going to do this one day. So it was a delight, and I still first and foremost think of myself as a fan, and I never want that to change. So it was just a year and a half, more or less, before the televised episode, and I just hooked myself every day. It was just a great experience.
Well, that's what I'm interested in that thing, Gary. First of all, just on that idea where the balance between being a fan and actually working on the show, because I think I've had that experience with certain people I've worked with, where you're in this kind of superposition of two states, where you are properly just working on something, but the other bit of you is going, bloody hell, this is actually what I do, this is the world I'm in.
Yeah, it was a lot more than bloody hell, believe me. Every single day. I was lucky in that, yes, I was there to be a script editor across these 3 shows and do all of that stuff. But one of the reasons that they had dragged me in to do this was because I had the knowledge. It's a bit like being a taxi driver. You have to have the knowledge. And they needed somebody there, I think. I mean, they never said to me, "You're only here because you know about Doctor Who." They were, "Oh, you're here because, you know, you did Big Finish and you scripted it and you produced all these shows and blah, blah, blah." Bottom line is, I think he knows, he's the sad man in the corner who every time somebody needs to know something about continuity across every department making these shows, costume, makeup, whatever, Gary is the person to come to. It's quite nice.
Yeah.
It's quite nice to be sort of an official paid person for liking Doctor Who. But yeah, I never ever forgot that sort of thrill for the whole sort of 6 years I was sat there. Back of my head was like, I'm actually working on Doctor Who. This is kind of weird, because if someone had said to me, "One day you'll work on Doctor Who," I'd go, no, that'll never happen. And that never left me. There was never a point where we became blasé about it or casual about it. It was always a thrill every single day to go in and go, "Oh, I'm working on my favourite telly programme."
And I read in an interview you did at some point where you said that it was, I think, a picture of you in the TV Times or something like that, where you had a bunch of Doctor Who books around you. And it was through that picture that you kind of found out that you were not the only obsessive.
Yeah, that was Famous Five again. That was the TV Times, and they said to each of us, you know, "Oh, what hobbies have you got?" And Marcus was like, "Oh, I do skateboarding," and Jennifer was, "Oh, I dance," and Shell was like, "Oh, I love going around clothing shops and things like that." And I'm sitting there going, "I don't have any hobbies. I just watch telly a lot." And they were like, "No, come on, what do you like doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm a big Doctor Who fan, and I've got all these Target books, and I read them." And they went, "That's brilliant, that's going to look fantastic." So I went down to Southampton, where we took the photographs, and took my pile of all my then Doctor Who novelisations, and a few Space 1999 ones, I think. And I had a little alien mask, and they hung that behind me. And I looked weird. Actually, I looked super cool because I'm in a really nice shirt. I've got my leg up and I'm kind of reading a copy of The Three Doctors. And I'm like, hey, I'm not on a stupid skateboard. I'm not dancing. I'm reading Doctor Who and The Three Doctors. I felt really kind of cool. But I did think at the time I was probably the only Doctor Who fan in the entire world. And that photograph led to me eventually joining the Doctor Who Appreciation Society, because people wrote to me and went, "Oh, we really like the Famous Five, but we really like the fact you like Doctor Who, blah, blah, and have you heard of the Dwaz?" And boom, and that leads to everything. So it all started for me with that photograph.
And I wonder, Keith, you know, that said, you know, the fandom remains, I think, as strong as ever, and that experience of your episode, the night your episode goes out, how do you, because I know that my friend Toby Haydock, he was the one who taught me the word that you all know, anticipantment, which is the excitement some people feel at the hope they're going to be let down by an episode of Doctor Who. This very kind of typical English thing. I hope this is rubbish. I wouldn't want to love something or enjoy it.
I felt like I was on a hiding to nothing from the beginning, because when it was announced that Series 4 writers were, a load of them said, "Keith Temple, who's he? He's only ever written soap." And you think, well, if you go back to the classic days, there was Malcolm Hook and Terence Dix and several writers on the show worked for Doctor Who. So I kind of felt, well, okay, there's a sense that they're all going to be disappointed, you know. So I just wrote, and what I do remember vividly is going to Cardiff, and they said, this is before transmission of the episode, we got a sort of 99% finished version of the episode, we'd like you to sit and watch it. And I watched it and I cried, because it was like a movie. It was like Doctor Who was in my head as a kid. Because, you know, people go on about wobbly sets, and that really, really bugs me, because they may have done, but as a child, my imagination was fired. And that's how it was when I saw the Planet of the Ood. It was just a wonderful experience. So there was no disappointment for me, really, and I think I said earlier that over time, because people are always cruel, it's easier to be cruel than it is to be kind. People said, "Oh, it's an old-fashioned episode, and nothing really happens, and yeah, 3 out of 10." And nowadays, people have a sort of kinder reaction to it when they see it, which I'm quite pleased about.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting you to have anticipation. It's just, by the way, because but I find it such an interesting trait amongst. I mean, you were saying, Gary, earlier about like, for instance, when you've done work around things like Lord of the Rings, and you've done the Lord of the Rings, the Lord of the Rings books, that there, you know, anyone who thinks a Doctor Who group of Doctor Who fans is could be judgmental, will you wait till you journey into Middle Earth?
Yeah. So, are there any Middle Earth fans here? Oh, there's a couple at the back staring daggers at me. So, I have never read Lord of the Rings or The Hobbit, and I never had any desire to do so because, God no, there's too many other interesting things to do in life. And I had the opportunity to go to New Zealand and spend time over there with the crew and do these behind-the-scenes art of books, which was meant to be one book originally covering all 3 films, and we very quickly realised, no, we needed 4 books to cover 3 films. That's what you call a clever writer, who says to his publisher, oh, no, 4 books. 4 books is the only way to do this. We've only paid you for 1. You have to pay me for another 3 then, won't you? And so I went out, and the reason I did this gig is because I knew nothing about Lord of the Rings. And they wanted someone who would be able to go and look at all these different bits of pre-production artwork with no preconceptions of what anything should look like. I would be selecting stuff based on how good it was, and just, oh, that's a Balrog, is it? Oh, that's lovely. Oh, that's some orcs. Oh, that's a very good picture. Don't like that one so much. And so that's how we did the book. And I was quite proud of that. And indeed, so was Peter Jackson and the Weta crew and everything. They liked the fact that I had no preconceptions. I then went and did a festival. It wasn't Hay on Wye, but it was a book festival. And much like here, except imagine about 40 times more of you, I was addressing a room of Lord of the Rings fans and said very proudly, I've never read Lord of the Rings, and this is why I got to do this fantastic book, was because I didn't know anything about it, thinking they might find that ironic and funny and humorous. And I realised very instantly, no, they did not find that funny. They thought I was sort of the devil, and how dare I have this brilliant opportunity and not appreciate it, which is fair enough. But I was sat, much like Keith and I are now, with another very famous Lord of the Rings writer called Brian Sibley. And Brian just leant over and very quietly whispered in my ear, well done, I've never seen anyone lose a room quite that quickly. And when the panel had finished and it was like, come on, let's all go and have a cup of tea or coffee, I was like, no. These people are actually going to kill me.
I love the line you said. He looked in and he said, not only have you failed to read the room, you've killed it.
Yes.
It's wonderful.
Delivered in a way that only Brian Sibley can deliver.
So Keith, what's your early relation? I mean, because in fact you've done the novelisation now as well.
Yeah.
What was that expected? Because both of you, of course, done a lot of book work. That experience of, for instance, what it's like to go, well, this I could not have put in the script for budgetary reasons, but when it's in the mind of everyone who's reading it, did you find yourself being able to explore other ideas?
Yeah, I did. Some of the things that I put in the novel, which weren't in the televised story, came from an early draft where I think it was Julie who said these things are too horrific, we can't have them. So I reinstated them for the novel. Because one of my favourite Target books is the Doctor Who and the Cave Monsters. And there's one scene or one part of that book which is about when Dr. Quinn is hiding his Silurian and locking it in a room in his cottage, and it escapes, it burns down the door and it kills him and it kills Miss Dawson, his assistant. I was convinced that that scene was part of the TV show. So when it came out on video, I thought, oh God, they've cut that bit out. But it didn't, it only existed in Malcolm Hulke's head. It entered the novel, and then it entered my sort of consciousness. And I love that element of being able to put something in which will kind of hopefully excite the reader, give a little bit of extra tension. And it's quite nice to go back and kind of readdress a couple of things, because I remember vividly at the time, of all the things people could criticise about that story, Planet of the Ood, one of them was someone said, oh, but it's 4126 and they've still got guns with and they're shooting bullets. You think, okay, well, they'd have ray guns by then. And you think, well, how do you know that? It could have been, the end of the world could have happened several times over by 4126 and they've gone down a different technological path. But all you're picking on is the fact that the guns shoot with bullets. So I kind of remember that and went back and rewrote it and explained why they still have bullets. So there are lots of little things.
I
that
hate
kind of
things
adjust.
like that, right? It's really clear in the laws of physics that you cannot go back in time, right? You can't do that. The laws of physics, it would change everything if you, I'm sorry if this is a shock, by the way, for some of you, but, right, you can't. And so then to go, I felt that the detail that was most annoying was, look, the whole thing, this is fun, this is imagination, and as long as the world itself is consistent, I think that's the most important thing.
Of course.
I mean, it's. I mean, did you find that sometimes as a script editor? You know, that bit of the consistency of a world, I think, in science fiction and in imaginative fiction is quite important. Like something like The Matrix, where in the first, you know, film, which I think is pretty good, and then the second film, there's kind of just a moment where Keanu Reeves going, oh yeah, I never got around to telling you I could fly. And you go, oh, why did you leave that? You should have done that last time. It would have been really useful. You know, that consistency is the thing that I think people are right to be annoyed by that.
When you mentioned The Matrix, I thought you were going to start talking about Gallifrey, you see. That shows the Doctor Who fan. Someone says the word Matrix, I go, oh yes, repository of all knowledge on the planet Gallifrey. And then people...
That is my favourite novelisation, actually, The Deadly Assassin.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
It's brilliant. No, I think, I mean, within each individual script, as you say, you have to keep it accurate within that script. If you worry too much about going, well, in that story 18 years ago, we established that the 48th century was the time of the great breakout of 64 million insects. You can't set your story in the 48th century because of something that was said 18 years. That's just nonsense. And each individual Doctor Who story has to stand on its own merits. There is a general consensus of information that you don't contradict, but you don't tie writers down and say, oh, you can't actually do that because in 1963, such and such a character actually said that was blue, and you go, yeah, but for my story it needs to be green. And you end up just going, yeah, make it green then. And we'll just assume the guy that said it was blue in 1963 was wrong. This idea that something that has been said a long time ago has to be adhered to in the 21st century, it's, to my mind, is the wrong way round.
Yeah.
You work on the assumption that if you need to change something, if you have changed something, advertently or inadvertently, just work on the assumption that the guy that said it in classic Who was probably wrong. Because now this is what we need for this story. But the bottom line really is each story should stand and fall its own merits. Continuity is a lovely bedrock that we all love and we all understand, but should never get in the way of telling a good story for 50 minutes on a Saturday night.
Yeah, and I know there's some people out there now going, which character was it in 1963 that said the thing was blue?
Hush.
Okay, so Keith, what was it, since that episode, and since you've kind of become part of, you know, because it seems to me that, you know, once you're in the Doctor Who world, there's no departing from it, is it? I imagine you get a lot of invites, and it's kind of, and so how have you found it as you've kind of moved into that world?
My first experience of fandom in the present time as a writer was Gally. In fact, you interviewed him. And,
I did.
And, oh my God, that was the night before was something I can never talk about. But that was my first experience of the fandom, and we were in this cavernous room, and what I loved and kind of was not exactly irritated by, but surprised by, was that people, once you've written something, or once you've painted something, it's out there in the public domain, it becomes owned by the public or the fans or whoever appreciates it, and it has a life of its own. So people who say to me things like, oh, we love the Nazi sort of allegory about your episode, I think, huh? Really? No? Well, if that's what you believe and that makes you happy, then that's fine. So I loved being in the Doctor Who world, and I still do. I love coming to these conventions and hanging around and talking to people and listening to people. But I quite like the anonymity of going back home and just being me. So I kind of dip in and dip out of fandom. Sometimes it scares me. There was a guy, I hope he's not here, at my first British convention. I was signing autographs, and he came up to me and he said, would you like a cup of tea? And I said, oh no, thanks, I've got a drink. And then he just stood there and kept saying, would you like a cup of tea? And eventually I thought, oh, it's a line from Planet of the Ood. I get it, all right, no thank you. No. And Oh, sorry about that. And he was kind of pleased with himself, and I just felt really bad that I'd kind of, not got it. So, yeah, it's been an interesting experience, and I enjoy myself whenever I'm out there, but I like to go home and just be me and not... So interesting what you said about as a child being the only fan that you weren't. That's what I loved about my childhood. I got involved in sort of events and things like that later, but at the time, as a 10-year-old, it was just me and my love of Doctor Who, and sometimes the only things I want to be alone with are at the 10th anniversary special and the Doctor Who and an exciting adventure with the Daleks, and everything else after that is kind of, well, that's out there, it's for other people, but this is me, this is my sense of my fandom.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. Now, have we got any questions? We've got a few minutes left. I just want to check. Yes, over there.
One thing that Russell was very good at when he was showrunner the first time round was tapping into various media like Human Nature and Spare Parts and the Sally Sparrow annual reference. I was wondering if you were involved in producing the programme this time round. Is there untapped media out there? Where would your go-to be for that?
Both of us, you can answer.
Okay, I think Russell's genius was actually, and is, making Doctor Who accessible to everybody. And I think where it starts to fail sometimes is when it's just skewed to a few people in the fan world. And I think what he should be doing, and hopefully he will continue to do that, is to keep engaging those people. So sometimes you think, oh, is that really Doctor Who? Is that Doctor Who world? Is that part of it? Yes, it is, because he's written it and it's wonderful. That's all I can say about that, really.
Yeah, I can't...
Should turn that off.
Yep. Sorry, we're boring you. I can't speak for Russell. I wouldn't dream of speaking for Russell. I can hear his voice in my head. If I tried speaking for Russell, and he'd crush me into a little single. So I can't answer what he would dip into now, 17 years since he last worked on Doctor Who. If I was the producer, were you asking what I'd do if I was the producer?
I think what I was interested in, because the storytelling of Who better than
No.
we do. No, you do. Because
Bless you, but no.
You've written, how many things have you written, Gary, over the years? And we've got fans of you. And I was just curious as to whether there was something you thought, that'd be a good television story, that would be that.
I could certainly sit down and go through a number of the stuff that I produced at Big Finish and go, I'd love to see that turned into a full telly episode, or a movie. But I don't, even if I was in charge of Doctor Who, I don't think I'd do it. I think I'd rather go, they were brilliant, maybe use the idea or the writer as a springboard. But I don't actually think now, I think, Russell did it for that first year because Doctor Who was coming back and Big Finish was relatively new at the time, and he was able to go to Rob and able to go to Paul and things like that and say, come on, let's use these and use your book, use your audio, whatever. But I don't think he'd dream of doing that now, and I don't think I would either. I think you have to go forward with this stuff and find new avenues. But I do think that there's a rich vein of good writing in Doctor Who books and audios and comic strips that I think is always worth a look, even if you end up not going with them. I think it's worth a look. Television is very much these days about reusing television writers, and on a show like Doctor Who, an experienced television writer is worth their weight in gold, as opposed to me, who's not an experienced television writer, because a TV writer is going to get to where you need them to get to very, very quickly, and that's important in the world of television with money and all of that. Whereas I think that first couple of years of Doctor Who, he could afford to experiment and take people and go, oh, you haven't done much. Both Paul and Rob had done television before Doctor Who anyway. But that ability to experiment was there in those first couple of years. I think now it would be a hard thing to do, and there's so many good TV writers out there who are queuing up to say, please, Russell, can I do Doctor Who for you? But I don't think he's going to need to look backwards at things that have already been written or acted or whatever. He will always go looking forward, and that's really how it should be.
Thank you.
We've got time for one more question, if anyone's got anything else that they'd... yes.
There's been much talk about spin-offs. What spin-off would you like to see?
So which spin-offs would you like to see?
Oh, that's a tough one, because the best one was the Sarah Jane Adventures. And where'd you go for that? I was listening to Louise's conversation earlier, her interview, and she was talking about a possible spin-off with Leela, and that would be fantastic, I think. But to see not Leela then, but Leela now, that's exciting dramatically, and creatively as well for a writer. So yeah, I'd go for, I'm with Louise on that one. Leela, something for Leela.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Just trying to gauge the audience. I'm afraid my first choice would be a series of Joe Martin's Doctor, without any doubt. And I'd love to see a Paul McGann series as well. Joe Martin would be my first choice for that.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both. I'd like to see Adventures of Morbius. I'd like to see
They'd be reasonably limited, wouldn't they?
No, not
Morbius when he's a Time
thing
Lord,
like that.
or Morbius with no head, or Morbius as he's falling to his doom.
Can I just say now, reasonably limited? You see already the Time Lord, the no head version, the wobbly brain version. It's going to be fantastic.
There may be a reason why you're not in charge of making television.
Oh, there's so many reasons.
Just putting that slight feeling out there that, you know, I think one can see why everyone goes, oh, Robin Ince. Yeah, no, we won't give him a TV show. We'll give him some books to talk about, and he can go and do something with Brian Cox. We'll keep him away from Morbius. Otherwise, we'll have the exciting adventures of Morbius and his sisterhood friends on television.
Oh, and Zarbi in the Underworld wasn't a
now
good
that
idea
you're
as well, you see there.
Zarbi. Now, the Zarbi and Minoptera getting their own spin-off. Now that I'm all aboard.
That's how you come up. You have to go through the Morbius stage to get to the Zarbi in the Underworld.
It's like larvae. You start off with Morbius, and that grows and turns. I'm sorry, Erica. Did you want us to shut up?
Oh, what? It's another auction. Right. Okay then.
Would you mind auctioning this off for me? It is signed by Louise.
So this is and this is a fantastic season 14 that we were talking about. So the DVD box set of this. I'll tell you what. Tell with it. Let's just start at 100 and then see if we can go up from that rather than down. So signed by Louise Jameson, the brilliant series 14 with so many extras on DVD. Where do I see the first bid? Go on then. 100, 100, 100, 100, 80, 80. Oh, 80 over there. Right. We start at 80 then for the box set signed by Louise Jameson. Any advance on 80? 80 over there. Any advance on 80? This is there's no one's got any money left, right? They've just got the.
Can I say somebody there just laughed? I think that was a bid.
Oh, okay, that counts as a bid. Yeah, so 200 over there, 200 over there. So we've still got 80 over there. No one going to go over 80 for this?
We'll go for it. We'll sell at 80.
80. So sold at 80. That is yours, Erica. There we are. And thank you very much to Gary and Keith. You've got Sue coming up in a minute, Sue, which will be fantastic. And hopefully we'll see you this evening with brilliant Avenue Who and the very excellent slight Doctor Who fan. I think he's slightly a Doctor Who fan. Mitch Ben as well. Just have a little hint that he likes it. Anyway, so Keith and Gary.
Thank you. And I said, are you the person who used to work on Juliet Bravo and Doctor Who? I didn't put Doctor Who first, I thought best not put her off straight away. And she said, yes I am. And I said, could I message you? And all of a sudden, I'm in contact with somebody who